So maybe you could comment on, uh, Russia's elections are coming up. Um, you mentioned the BRICS summit is happening in about a half a year or less. There's 30 countries, I think, lined up to join. Maybe you could illuminate, as there's talks about, let's say, the U.S. building a so-called port on the coast of Gaza. Maybe you could talk about your extensive knowledge of what exactly is Russia and, of course, its biggest partner, China, and the rest of the multipolar world. What are they building here out of these flurry of events that is in such stark contrast to what we're seeing in the United States and the collective West, which is just any changes that happen, it really is just more of the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, the contrast is graphic between building new pathways towards real multipolarity and where all poles are respected and all poles talk to each other and all poles exercise diplomacy, real diplomacy, and the forever wars syndrome, which is now, let's say, spiced up by total desperation. It's fascinating to see how coordinated these fits, in fact, from Le Petit Roi in Paris and the German generals. They are mirrors of what Lloyd Austin said before these things happened. Weapons peddler Austin, as we all know, said that if Ukraine loses, then NATO will be at war with Russia, inevitably. Well, first of all, that's wrong because NATO is already at war with Russia. This is a war of NATO against Russia using Ukraine as cannon fodder. But at least Austin is not exactly like the brightest bulb in the room. At least he let the cat out of the bag finally. And the cat went out screaming, actually, because then we had Macron doubling down and actually for the first time saying the unsayable, NATO troops on the ground. Everybody knows that NATO advisors, mercenaries, and even some special forces are on the ground. Everybody knows that. But obviously, European public opinion, which is completely brainwashed, they don't know it. And of course, the four German stooges, the 1, 2, 3, 4 password guys, of course. The most extraordinary thing, and these are high-ranking officers. These are not a bunch of idiots. Okay, bunch of idiots, but not a sense.
I think they were the top. I think they were the top commanders in the German Air Force,
including top commanders of the German Air Force. And they were okay. Look, we can go there. We can use the Taurus. We send them a 50 Taurus or whatever. They bomb the Kerch Bridge, and we have plausible deniability. So they were commenting on an act of war, assuming that Russia would simply, okay, look at it and, okay, we're not going to do anything. It's another red line that will come and go. And this is normal. And afterwards, when they started the spin operation, they changed the subject. Nobody talked about the actual content of the conversation. No, this was Russia. The evil Russians were eavesdropping us. The evil Russians are hacking us. They want to install a dissent inside NATO, all that crap. So, well, considering that nowadays any substantial discussion of content discussion of what this war actually means for the collective West, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in Britain, or not to mention Britain, of course, especially Britain, because the Brits, they have a 300-year hard on to get into a fight with Russia. In France, for obvious reasons, no way. Germany, no way. Italy, no way. And the others don't count. The others are chihuahuas. So the problem is now we are overstepping another red line because this is becoming feasible. Okay, missiles hitting Russian infrastructure in Russia. and they think that there won't be consequences. So, the other day I posted something just for laughs. There are only three categorical imperatives in life: death, taxes, and idiots who think that they can attack the Russians and there will be no consequences. And they never learn. They're doing exactly this is Barbarossa 2.0 in slow motion in front of us. It's completely absurd. From two pieces of shit military powers like France and Germany, Yemen can kick their asses with their hands behind their back. The Houthis can kick both their asses. So it simply doesn't make sense. You have to, guys, you have to see the debates in the French mainstream media and on their internet. I usually take a look at, after I live there part of the year, I have to know what's going on. It's mind-boggling. They actually take it seriously. Obviously, the most important information, which is the revolt of generals in France, especially retired generals, saying that Macron is an absolute idiot and a suicidal maniac to say something like this in public, and double down, which is what we did this week. Obviously, you won't see this on their 8 o'clock news or Le Monde, Le Figaro, the main papers, etc. And in the German papers, which used to be good 20, 25 years ago, maybe, you don't see a discussion of the content of, okay, we're going to blow up their infrastructure and we're going to get away with it because they're going to say, no, it was not us. Look, words fail me, really. Words fail me. But this is, I would say, it's a room full of mirrors of, on one side, degradation of educational standards and diplomatic standards all across NATO stan, and degradation of real strategic thinking all across NATO stan, from Pentagon to Brussels to the main European capitals. That's what we have. We have these two. We have Le Petit Roi saying what he said, and we have the four crowd clowns saying what they said. It's terrifying because as this thing progresses, we are getting closer and closer to the ultimate red line, which is a direct NATO war against Russia. Well, it's very, very funny. I was discussing this with some Russian analysts, and everybody was actually laughing, saying, look, we are dying to have the French send their troops here. They're going to be turned into Minsk meeting less than 24 hours. So bring them here. We're waiting. Just like what they're waiting for the Abrams tanks. 3 destroyed in 1 week. So because the Russians now, they are, after Avdiivka had a very important element of solidifying Russian perceptions on, okay, it's a very hard slog, it's a long slog, but maybe this is the beginning of the long ending. Yeah? The long goodbye for the Nazifiers in Kiev and their acolytes. No, it's going to take it's going to be very, very long. But now, even if the advances will continue to be slow, even if the Russians are not putting 500,000, 700,000 extra soldiers in the battlefields, they don't need that. They want to keep on. The focus is always two-way. Demilitarization, which is working wonders not only in Ukraine, but NATO as a whole, and the long-term process of denazification. There are some hints already coming, even from Putin, but especially from Medvedev Unplugged, that Odessa is a Russian city and Kiev is a Russian city. So you can draw your own conclusions. No? And of course, you can draw your own conclusions on the Black Sea and the liaison with eventually with Transnistria. But then there are a lot of problems. Everybody knows that Odessa has to be conquered or reconquered or liberated over ground. It's not going to be through the Black Sea. And on the Black Sea, the Russian Black Sea Fleet is fighting a lot of problems, which range from not being well prepared and incompetence. So this is a raging discussion here and in Russian military channels as well, because they already lost 3 ships in this past few weeks. This is not good at all. Okay, the bulk of the ships they transferred already to Novosibirsk, but there's still a lot of vessels in Sebastopol and in the Black Sea area controlled by Russia. So this is not good. And there's got to be a purge in the Black Sea Fleet. Apparently, the commander has already been fired. So this is something that requires a lot of extra attention by the Ministry of Defense. But the overall mood over here, and with the elections, there's going to be a new government. Lots of people discuss, okay, who's staying, especially who's staying, because some of them won't be, and nobody knows who are the new faces in the new government. There's even talk about Sergei Lavrov may not continue as Minister of Foreign Relations, which would be a pity. But all that, the overall mood is that, and with BRICS, of course, all the BRICS discussions, that this year the initiative on all fronts is on Russia. And that's what driving NATO stun as a whole totally bonkers. And of course, the State of the Union address was very, very clear on at least one thing. That's that thing that talked yesterday, moved by a fabulous cocktail of all sorts of pills. It didn't last long, apparently. Anyway, but it lasted.
No, the last half of that speech was
exactly.
wild.
But at least, Danny, at least he managed to finish that rant, which in itself is quite something. He already started his campaign for assuming he lasts until November. So there's no plan B. They are not looking at an alternative candidate. As cosmically absurd as it might seem, this guy is going to be the Democrat candidate for the next presidential elections. In itself, this is the mind boggles, right? So obviously, Ukraine is a secondary issue compared to it, especially because of the Ukraine fatigue with the American population, Ukraine fatigue of everybody, in fact, except leaderships across NATO stan. So the ball now is on the European court. So the ball now is essentially France, Germany. Of course, this stupid NATO stan exercise, the Nordic Defender, which was correctly interpreted by Sergei Narishkin, the head of Russian foreign intelligence, say, yes, they are preparing for a war. And Patrushev, this week, he said exactly the same thing. Yeah, we can see what they're doing. They're preparing for a war. And certainly via Scandinavia and the Baltics. So the Russians are ready. Whatever happened, the Russians are ready. In terms of their reserves, never forget, only 15% of Russian soldiers and weapons is at the moment in the Donbass, in the black soil of Donbass, in the battlefield. 85% is still being kept for, if it comes, the real war against NATO. And NATO has nothing for this war. And even the Americans, if they decided to, transport troops from the US to the new theater of war in Ukraine, say goodbye, because Russian submarines would incinerate them even before they land. So everywhere you look, you see how cornered they are. So NATO stan as a whole is a cornered animal. And because of the lack of strategic depth and strategic thinking of all of all these people, all these commanders, starting with Lloyd Austin himself. The only thing he knows how to strategize is how to sell weapons. That's it. So there is a very worrying possibility that this thing might get out of control in the next few months. In parallel, we have a hybrid war. And a hybrid war against all across the post-Soviet space. They will keep trying. And they will keep trying to destabilize the situation inside Russia with minimal to zero success, I would say. Because Russian society is now very, very solid. Putin managed, even before his re-election, which is practically inevitable next week, to coalesce Russian society and make everybody understand that this is, in fact, a civilizational war, and it is the collective West as a whole against Russia, led by the hegemon, and it's a do-or-die thing, literally. The fact that the only correct thing that Lloyd Austin actually said is that we can, once again, repeated by Macron, they cannot accept a cosmic, stratospheric NATO humiliation in Donbass, which is what's going to happen between this year and the first part of next year. Because then this will be the spark that will make the whole imperial project collapse. The Global South already knows this. And that explains this gigantic list who wants to join BRICS. That explains that everybody is on board. Okay, let's start trying all different mechanisms of de-dollarization, trade, settlement in our own currencies, different trade settlements, you name it. So this is all going the same way. They're following the same. It's the same Silk Road caravan. Traveling the same path. And on the other side, once again, we have a war that they are losing in Novorossiya and a war that they are losing in Gaza as well. And that's another gigantic can of worms. The much discussed at the moment possibility of a massacre in Rafah is the last desperate card by those psychopathic biblical subhumans, I would say, in Tel Aviv. This is extremely serious. But still, we don't have unified Islam fighting against it. And this is a very, very serious discussion that leadership in Islamic countries don't want to have. Because what they are figuring out short-term, medium-term, is not what the Arab street and the Islam street, let's put this word all over the world, is thinking. So can you imagine? This year is, in one sense, this is the year of hopes and dreams, what we saw in the conferences and the World Youth Festival. And on the other hand, it's the year of total desperation and doom and gloom, and maybe a black void that is going to engulf us all. If the so-called collective West leaders, in absolute desperation, they try a Hail Mary pass, which they know it's not going to work from the start. The problem is, and this is what our friend Andrei Marcianov is always saying, they have no clue, not only about how fragile they are, but especially of all the strong points, military, hypersonic, nuclear, etc., of the Russians. They underestimated Russia from the start. Now they're starting to pay the price. If they hadn't underestimated Russia, they would have a plan B or plan C. But there was only plan A, as we all know. And everybody coming to your show, Danny, our friends that go to Judge Knapp, our small group, we have been talking about this from the beginning. The idea was we're going to destroy the Russian economy in a few weeks or maybe months, and they're going to lose on the ground because we're going to provide the best NATO weapons, and they're going to smash the Russian army in Novorossiya. That's where we are now. Nothing happened. And the blowback is tremendous. So there's no plan B because there was never any plan B. So this is part of, I would say, this is being discussed here in Moscow, and it's being discussed between the Russians and the Chinese, but not as deep yet. It's like they are daring, especially the Americans or NATO, to do something absolutely foolish. And then there's going to be like, when the bear wakes, oh shit, you better not be in front of him, But it's I would say it's an interregnum, like we are in the middle of a thriller, and you know that the serial killer is going to attack again, but we don't know when. So this is where we are at the moment. It's very, very dangerous. The only thing that I would say minimizes the danger is when you look, for instance, at the 2 sessions that you mentioned at the beginning in China. I'm going to write my column this weekend about the 2 sessions. The Chinese, with all there are structural problems, very, very serious. They're very cool. They said, no, we're going to keep on growing. We're going to retune our growth model. We're going to sanitize the real estate market. We're going to sanitize shadow banking. We are going to continue with our Made in China 2025, which is they are becoming leaders in most of the top 10 high technology domains, which was the idea when they started this 7 years ago, more or less. And of course, Belt and Road and projects, uniting the Belt and Road Initiative with BRICS projects, with Shanghai Cooperation Organization projects, etc. So when you do the breakdown of what they discussed during the 2 sessions this week in Beijing, it's quite optimistic, in fact. But with some mini bombshells, for instance, that now they're saying finally out loud that there's got to be a Palestinian state, and what's happening over there is beyond absurd. This coming from Chinese diplomacy is already a huge step. Of course, because they have been talking with the Russians about it, and they have been talking with the Iranians about it. And they all have strategic partnerships among themselves. So this is also changing. The Chinese are becoming more assertive, and they are always reminding the Americans on Taiwan, if you try anything foolish, you will regret it. Big, big time. So let's say this was a concise way to try to paint, Danny, lightness and darkness painting in front of us. It is very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. And this is something, for instance, in my case, I notice when I go back to the West. I'll be back to the West in 3 weeks or so. And I know I'm going to be plunged right in the middle of the hall. While you're here, you focus on the path ahead, BRICS, de-dollarization, going towards multipolarity. Your interlocutors are all thinking the same way in terms of let's try to change the world while it's still possible. But when you go back to the West, it's like the pit and the pendulum. It's Edgar Allan Poe in front of you, and you go straight into the pit.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.